Welcome, everyone. I'm Tracy Fitzpatrick, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's event, Best Practices to Build Scalable AI Solutions on AWS. And presenting today's topic is Terumi. Terumi is an Amazon AAI training consultant and author holding more than 25 years of experience in IT. Her passion for cloud computing developed at a very early age. Being a teenager, she always showed her enthusiasm for understanding the technologies that make computers tick. This deep sense of curiosity on technology led her to achieve all the associate, professional, and specialty certifications and was recognized as an AWS Authorized Instructor Champion. Now, please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic. We offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored to your specific requirements. If you are interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session is also being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. We do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We do have 9 practice areas in which we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the Cloud Practice Area. Netcom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio of courses for the topic being covered today. Our upcoming classes include various trainings on the given courses. You can also access a variety of marketing assets, such as the free training and blogs, by clicking on the available event handout. These offerings can be found with a simple search on our website at netcomlearning.com. The rapid adoption of AI has compelled businesses to integrate intelligence solutions into their infrastructures. With AWS, achieving this is seamless, secure, and efficient. Today's session aims to guide you through this integration process, making your journey to AI-powered efficiency a breeze. We will get an overview of AWS machine learning services, best practices for data preparation and feature engineering, and much more. And now I would like to give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To begin with, you do have the option to view in full screen by clicking on the full screen button on the right side of the GoToWebinar viewer. Simply hit the escape key to exit the full screen. Everyone has been muted except for our presenters. Feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters here in the questions pane, and we will address them at the end of the session. And to get the best out of today's events, we've included the slides, courses we talk about, and marketing assets in the handout section of your GoToWebinar viewer. You may refer to them at any time to get a better understanding of today's topic. And we do realize that some of you may have to leave early and want to let you know that as you do leave the session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to take a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience and improve our future sessions for you. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. And now I'd like to pass this over to our trainer to present today's topic. Hey, Terumi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session on best practices to build scalable AI solutions on AWS. My name is Terumi Laskowski, and I am a AWS Authorized Instructor. All right, so what are we going to cover today? The title sounds pretty exciting, so here we go. So today's agenda are these. And by the way, today is very short, so I'm going to give you an overview of these things. So, what is AWS Machine Learning Services? So I'm going to give you a real high-level overview on that. Best practices for data preparation and feature engineering, which is part of the machine learning pipeline. And third, architectural consideration for scalable AI solutions on AWS, because these solutions sits on top of AWS and uses AWS components such as networking and virtual machines and such. So we'll be talking about those. And then I'll introduce you one case study, a real world example of how the scalable AI solutions used out in the wild. And also we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Okay, so let's go and take a look at first, the overview of AWS Machine Learning Services. By the way, just as a note, that I'm assuming that everyone who's attending this session knows what a machine learning is, right? So I'm not going to cover that. So we're going to go directly into, okay, so given you know what machine learning is, how do you do that on AWS? There's actually a portal that you can go to that has, it's a pretty good portal that has all the information about the machine learning services on AWS. So let me kind of go there quickly and show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is the portal for machine learning on AWS. And what I like is that if you look at the top menu, right, there are use cases. So other than the use cases that I'm going to be talking about today, all the AI services, right, all the machine learning services. Okay, notice that how they separate out the AI services and ML services, the framework, the infrastructure, learning, resources, right? So everything you probably need to find out what AWS offers is right here on this page. Okay. Anyway, so let's go back into the presentation material. Alrighty, so given that, I've actually created some slides with summaries of services, okay, divided into categories. So AWS arguably it has tons, right, of AI services. So I need to break it up into a little bit more bigger chunks. So I've divided into high-level services, mid-level APIs, lower-level frameworks, specialized libraries, and ML ops and data pipeline. So I'll explain what that means, right? So the high-level services are, if you can imagine something like SaaS, right? Services that offer built-in models and, things are already pre-made for you, and all you do is pick and choose and use that, right? So that's high-level services. Mid-level APIs gives you a little bit more control, but it still is, features are easier to use for common tasks, okay? But it's a little bit more detailed and more control than high-level services. Low-level frameworks is the actual components that you can use for yourself. So services that offer most control, customizable, but it does require some expertise in your part, and it does require some manual setup. Okay. Then we have specialized libraries and algorithms from ML, and then ML ops is machine learning operations. So once you create your model, how do you maintain it, right? So there's something called ML ops and the data pipeline that uses it. Anyway, so here we go. High-level services, the flagship services for AWS is SageMaker. So it is a fully managed platform, right, to build and train and do everything you need to do on machine learning on AWS. Okay, so I'm going to show you in a moment what SageMaker looks like. Now, there are other nice-to-have services like Amazon Comprehend, which is a natural language processing service to find insight in text. So you feed it text, it'll read it, okay, and then it'll try to make sense of it, right? Lex, I use it often here. So Lex is a automatic speech recognition, natural language understanding, right, for building interfaces. So in this case, like chatbots, right? Amazon Polly, pretty interesting. It's text to speech. So if you feed text, it'll speak back to you, okay, with lifelike speech and accents and intonations and such. And then there is recognition with a K, where you feed images and it'll identify objects within images. Okay. Now that we've kind of talked about SageMaker, let's go ahead. Let me show you what a SageMaker looks like. So here, it's in one of these tabs. There we go. So what you're seeing is my account, and I'm on the SageMaker menu. So there it is. And you'll see on the left-hand menu right here, right? These are all the things that SageMaker does, okay? And here we are, starting from the ground truth, notebook, processing, training, inference, all that is mostly where people live, right? When they're doing AI and machine learning, that's where they feed the data, that's where they process the data, that's where they train the models and such, and you could do all that in SageMaker. Alrighty, so let's go back. So that was high-level services. And the next one, mid-level services, is, like I said, these are APIs that you can use. And some representative services and products are AWS Deep Lens. I actually have that picture of a Deep Lens right there on the left side for you. It's a piece of hardware. It's a camera, but you can put machine learning models inside so that it will take the images that it sees in the world, and then you can have that image being processed by the machine learning model that you created right inside that box. Translate, transcribe, forecast, personalize. I think it's pretty much self-explanatory, but these are things that you can use within your tasks, common tasks, right, without putting too much effort into it. All right, and the next one is the low-level framework. So these are the infrastructure frameworks and low-level services, right? So these are things like building blocks, right, of AI services within AWS. So if you see something like elastic inference, right, just the right amount of inference acceleration to an Amazon EC2 or SageMaker instance. So we're talking really about virtual machines and capabilities of the virtual machines and the CPUs and GPUs that it houses. And it gives you that acceleration that you need, that little boost that you need at times when you're doing your inferences. AWS Deep Learning AMIs, Amazon Machine Images. So Amazon Machine Images are the basis for your EC2, the virtual machines where you do your AI and machine learning work. And AWS already has a prepared machine images that you can use to spin up your EC2s. Inferentia, machine learning inference chip, right? We're talking about hardware now, and also we're talking things like EC2 instances with optimized for machine learning. So these are very similar to the AMIs that I talked about that was already created for the machine learning. So these are components, and so you have to know what it is that you want, but it's there if you need it. Okay, and let's talk about the specialized libraries. We're talking about the ML libraries, deep learning libraries and such. These common ones that you see, and this is not AWS specific, right? So you see this out in the world, and AWS have them for you, so you don't have to go out and go get them, from outside of AWS. So MXNet, TensorFlow, PyTorch, these are very common, libraries that people use, and it's all here. So scikit-learn is another one that's pretty popular. Anyway, so it's all within AWS for you. The specialized algorithms, so now we're talking about the ML algorithms, XGBoost, random forest, k-means clustering, linear learner. These are very familiar type of algorithms that people already use, that's already inside AWS. So that once again, you don't have to go outside. You can just go ahead and use the one that they have, right? But AWS is pretty open when it comes to the algorithms and libraries, so that if you have libraries and algorithms that's not inside AWS, then most likely you will be able to bring it inside to SageMaker environment and then go ahead and use it. Now, in the description of this course, there was a mention about Lambda. So let me go ahead and briefly talk about Lambda. So Lambda, for those of you that knows about the service, it is a serverless compute engine. So compute means processing. It's serverless, means that if you only use Lambda, you don't have to worry about servers, maintaining servers. All you do is provide an application and read it into Lambda and just run it. Okay. So how is that used in machine learning, right? So because it's more of a generic service, it can be used on anything that requires, crunching numbers. And also Lambda is event driven. So when something happens, you can trigger Lambda, right? So because of that, you could do data collection, pre-processing, because that's crunching data, model deployment in inference engines, anything that you could think of that requires computing, you could possibly apply Lambda to it. Okay. If you go a little bit down on the list, we have event-driven ML pipeline. So you can kickstart a machine learning pipeline process when certain events happen, so that when those events happen, it triggers Lambda, and Lambda can trigger the pipeline. And also, API gateway is a very popular way for accessing Lambda from the internet, right? So if you want people to access Lambda related to AI, you can actually have those people access Lambda using the API gateway. So API gateway has, once again, this is another generic type of service that usually goes together with Lambda. All right, so that is a brief overview of what's included in the AWS's AI machine learning repertoire. All right, so let's move on to the next part of the agenda. So best practice for data preparation and feature engineering. Okay, so I mentioned at the beginning that the data preparation and feature engineering is part of machine learning pipeline. Okay, so what in the world is this pipeline though, right? So pipeline is how data is acquired, how they're processed, and how they're trained, and then deployed, and how they're monitored, right? So I have all the pipeline items here for you. So it starts with data collection and ingestion, right? You have to get the data somewhere, and machine learning most likely is going to need tons of data, right? So then, but sometimes you have these data that's not clean, data missing, what have you. So you have to go into data cleaning and transformation, and then I'm going to skip, I'm not going to go through all the pipeline items, but then next thing you do is feature engineering. Okay, so the feature engineering is you have to identify what is most valuable part of this data that you have, which will give you most value in your machine learning and AI, right? So because you may have some data that has nothing to do with what you want to do, and you have certain data that's really, really important in identifying stuff, right? Just for example, something like, well, if you feed an image and you want to identify whether it's a dog or a cat, what are the features of that image? What is the feature of the dog that makes it different from a cat, and vice versa, right? And I'm not sure, I'm a dog owner, so I'm not exactly sure if there's difference in the fur, but maybe just in my mind, fur probably isn't a major feature, but maybe ears, the facial structure, the tail, I don't know, that could be features, right? So feature engineering is a very, very important part of making sense and picking apart data that you have and filtering out things that you don't need, right? Then you have the model training, evaluation, on and on. So that's the pipeline that people normally has, right? And so any type of machine learning work will go through this process, right? So now we're going to concentrate then on the data processing part, which I have identified in orange. So data collection, ingestion, data cleaning and transformation, and feature engineering. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. So with the data preparation, there are many ways that you can do data preparation, but in AWS, they already have some tools available for you to make it easy so that you could do data preparation very quickly. A lot of people say that data preparation part and data cleaning part is the part that takes the most time in machine learning, right? Because garbage in, garbage out, right? So you have to make sure that the data that comes in is clean, so the output you have is a good output. Anyway, but that data have to be stored. So data storage and accessibility, S3 by hands down is the storage service of choice, because S3 is an object storage. It can handle humongous amounts of data. Data cleaning. So there is a service called AWS Glue, and Glue is a service that AWS offers for ETL, extract, transform, load. There you go, perfect, right? Perfect option for cleaning. And then there's data sampling, schema definition, data versioning. For example, data versioning, whenever you have some additional data coming in, right? You don't want to process the data that you already processed, so you want to just make sure that you process the data that just changed and stuff. So that's, you want to make sure that you have versioning so that you know what part changed, so that you can do processing of the data that has changed, right? So, and there are tools available on AWS for that as well. So that's data preparation. let's move on to feature engineering, okay? So feature engineering, this is the, I'm sorry, iterative process, right? Because what I thought was a feature, let's say I thought maybe tail was the difference between cat and a dog, and that after I go through this iteration of this pipeline, I find out that no, it's not really the tail, right? Okay, so they say, oh, okay, so I got the feature wrong, so let's go ahead and fix that. Let's go ahead and do something else to the data so that the machine learning will produce more accurate data. So we have to first go through the feature in selection, then transformation, because sometimes, well, not sometimes, but in general, machine learning models like ones and zeros. They don't like red, blue, green, whatever, right? So they like numbers. So you may have to transform whatever you have into these ones and zeros. Okay. Feature creation. Derive new features that might give additional insight. So maybe combination of the ear and the tail, right, will give a feature that will differentiate between, let's say, dog and a cat. I'm just making this up, but so that will be feature creation. So you can actually do this in SageMaker, right? So there are built-in algorithms for selecting features, for automatic transformations, create and test features. So yeah, so SageMaker is the go-to tool to do this part. Now, part two of feature engineering is data imbalance, data splitting. So if you do machine learning, you understand these are some issues that you may have with the data. So so that your data is not skewed if you don't want it to be in one way or another, right? Also, creating pipelines and going through the iteration, going through over and over again until you fine tune it so that the features are great and your model looks great. So all that, most of the things can be done in SageMaker and SageMaker pipelines. There you go. And the last but not least is the monitoring. So once you have the model running and you want to make sure that your model is outputting the predictions in the range of accuracy that you're looking for, you always have to keep monitoring, right? Because things change, data change, context change, maybe features change. So that's a pretty important part. And once again, there's an automated way of doing that as well in the AWS. All right, so there you go. So that's a quick one for data preparation and feature engineering. Okay. Alrighty. So now let's move into the part about the architecture. Okay. After all, the AWS is in the business of infrastructure. Okay. And the SageMaker and other tools will eventually allow you to put your model onto AWS's platform so that you can deploy it to the world, right? So that's what we're talking about. And we have to make sure that it's scalable so that if you only need just a little bit of resources, that's all you use. If you need a lot more resources, that's, you get additional one automatically, very quickly, very flexibly. And then you could move back and forth between small and big, depending upon your needs, so that you're not overpaying, you're not wasting resources, right? Okay, so here we go. So architectural considerations here are these. So when you design, something that's scalable. So when we say scalable, that's what I mean, right? Being flexible about the capacity and the performance. So scalable AI solution in AWS, there are some considerations. So I've actually kind of made a list of the architectural components that goes into creating a scalable, high performance AI infrastructure on AWS. So I have from compute resources all the way down to compliance and governance. Okay, so I do have a slide for each and every one of them. So let me go ahead and quickly go over these. Right. So the compute resources. This is where you crunch numbers, and when you're training models, this is normally where you need the most power of computing. And then when you deployed your model, which is an inference model, it's not, depending, of course, on the type of use case that you have, but normally it's not going to need as much crunching power as you needed when you were training, okay? But anyway, so compute resources, EC2, auto scaling for elasticity, that's for scaling, right, horizontal scaling. So if you need more more compute power, more EC2, more whatever that's related to compute, you can go ahead and scale. So usually it's auto scaling is for EC2s, right? EC2, for those of you that do not know, these are virtual machine services. Resource types, because they're virtual machines run on top of actual physical machines. And if you need CPU, great. If you need GPU, great. AWS have those hardwares ready so that you can actually create your virtual machines on top of that. Okay, so there it is. So that's what you need to consider, though, when you're creating your resources. Do I need a CPU? Do I need a GPU? You need to make sure that you select the right type of EC2 resources for your model. Next one, data storage. Now, with the machine learning, as I mentioned earlier, it takes lots and lots of data. And in order for you to crunch these data in a very, very fast manner, sometimes you have to, read them differently, group them differently. So data partitioning, data caching, optimized data formats is all the kind of things you do so that you're not just storing data, but you're storing the data in a way that you can search them, you can process them in a very fast manner. So there you go. DynamoDB is a NoSQL database that's like super fast, right, on AWS. And Elasticache, and also AWS supports various types of data formats for big data, analytics, and AI, such as Parquet. All right, so that's data storage. Data pipeline, right? Okay, so usually when you're creating an inference model, either it's a batch processing or it's a real-time processing. So if you're using your model to, let's say, run the inference once a day, once every week or something, you would use a batch. Real time is as the data comes in, requesting for your prediction, it's always up and running, right? So those are the type of options that you have. And also within the pipeline, we do the data cleansing, right? Data processing. So something like a AWS Glue that I mentioned. So that would be part of the data pipeline. Okay. Data model training. So yes, we have to do the model training. So distributed training, pipeline in parallel, right? So once again, how quickly do you need something? What type of data are you processing? What type of machine learning are you doing? Is it deep learning? Is it, non-deep learning type of machine learning? What are you doing? Okay, so that's part of the architecture consideration as well. Next one is model deployment, right? And so this is where now you have the model that you want, and now you make that available to the world. Well, how do you make it available? Well, normally using AWS's network infrastructure and AWS's compute resources. And remember, we discussed about API gateways and lambdas, right? So if you want people to access your model, let's say from the internet, maybe you'll make it so that your architecture contains the API gateway, which triggers Lambda, which triggers the pipeline, right? So it's however you want to make that available. And some of these models may not be available from the internet, or maybe it's just all internal. So depending upon that, how are you going to deploy? Now, multi-AZ deployment is a best practice for deploying any type of networking resources. So availability zones are grouping of data centers that are 3 to 20 miles apart physically, so that when something happens to a set of data centers and their resources, hopefully the other data centers within another availability zone will not have been negatively impacted, so that your model stays up and running, right? So it's not a machine learning specific thing, but it's a more of a best practice deployment options in AWS. Model versioning, auto scaling, sure, right? You can have multiple models running, but how do you handle that, right? How do you handle version 1 of the model, version 1.1 of the model, version 2 of the model, right? And how do you have these multiple models maybe running at the same time, right? So this, once again, this is another type of architectural decision that you have to make. Networking, yes, right, it goes with computing too. You want to make it so it's low latency, especially if it is for your real-time, inference. And where are the people accessing your model from, right? Are they accessing from very far away? Are they very close? Depending upon that, latency may become an issue. So there are more generic services called Global Accelerator, CloudFront. CloudFront is more like a cache. Global Accelerator is allowing your customers that reside like far away globally from where your model is to get inside AWS network as quickly as possible where they're located. So if my customers are in Japan, they can get inside AWS network from Japan, then travel, let's say, all the way to North Virginia, where your model resides, all inside AWS's network rather than going through the internet. So that's going to make latency more predictable, right? So anyway, so these are, like I said, it's not AI specific, but these are definitely components of the AI that you want to, your AI solution that you want to consider. VPC designs, there are different ways that VPC can work and isolate. So VPC can work for security. VPC can work to separate out and isolate certain resources. So there you go. And talking about security, the accessing your model, you probably don't want anybody and everybody to access your models, right? So you can go ahead and determine who has what type of permissions by setting up identity and access management policies, and also data encryption. You may have something that's sensitive, or perhaps the data in transit. You want to make sure that they're encrypted. So yeah, data encryption and all that is it's fairly common to integrate these features. Okay. Next one, monitoring and logging, right? So once you deploy the model, you have to monitor them to make sure that they still work okay. And just in case something happens, you want to make sure you have good logs, right, of what's happening. So yeah, those features. If you take something like CloudWatch, CloudWatch is the flagship service for monitoring and alerting, depending upon the events that happen, and metric, right? So you can definitely use that on your SageMaker and other components. Logging using CloudTrail. CloudTrail will record all the AWS API calls. And X-Ray will do tracing of your data. So all of a sudden something gets really, really slow or something breaks, you could look at these logs and see, hey, what's going on? Cost management, okay, and cost management as in cost optimization. So maybe the initial architecture and the resources that you've set up for yourself is spending too much money, and you may want to say, hey, is there any way that we can reduce this cost? And yeah, so cost management. So there are features within AWS such as Cost Explorer that I use often, right, to make sure that some unexpected cost is not going to cause problems. And then reserve instances are where you do a advanced purchase. So it's a promise that you're going to be using certain amount of resources, and AWS gives you a deep discount, right? So there you go. It's like a volume discount. And compliance and governance, right? That's pretty important, especially because you are talking about lots and lots of data and possibly could have some consequences with privacy and also data sovereignty. That is, maybe your data is not supposed to move physically outside of your countries and such. So when you're doing these ML and AI models, when you're doing processing, where's your model, where's the data coming from, all that has to be, controlled. So data governance, data lineage, and when you get some type of an output from the machine learning, you say, okay, how'd you get that, right? Like what was the logic behind that, right? Okay, and sometimes you may have to do that. So, and you may have to show the auditor, okay, so here's the data, and this is how we processed it, and here's the model, and here's the output, right? So, in order to do that, you have to have some way to maintain data lineage, right? Keeping track of data sources and transformations for compliance purposes. So yeah, there you go. So that is all the items that I've actually come up with for the architectural considerations. One more time, all the way from compute, data storage, data pipeline, model training, deployment, network, security, monitor, cost management, compliance, and governance, right? That's a lot of things to do, okay? But most of the time, you would do this anyway, whether it is a ML type of work or non-ML type of work. Perhaps, the data pipeline is a little bit, data pipeline, model training, model deployment would be something very specific to ML, but all the other things are just regular best practice things that you have to consider for architecture. Alrighty. So like I said, this is a short, brief. So here is topic number 4. So let's talk about case study in the real world, right? Using a real world example. So I've chosen for you a very popular one, and the one that you probably have already heard of, hopefully. So it's Netflix, right? So Netflix, this particular, the way Netflix Flix actually takes advantage of the machine learning in AWS was presented in the reInvent, right? So I have a link for you here. There's a YouTube video on it, so you may want to check it out if you're interested in that. Okay, so I think we probably don't need to go into what Netflix is, right? Okay, but they have many subscribers, and they needed to have a solution for recommendation engine, right? So recommendation engine would be, hey, Terumi, here's a movie that you've selected, and here's all the other ones that you may also like too, right? So that's the recommendation engine. And recommendation engine using AI slash ML for that is very popular to do. Okay. So what Netflix did was it leveraged AWS infrastructure to handle millions of requests for recommendations per minute, right? So we're not talking about onesies and twosies here. We're talking about like per minute, right? Millions of requests, okay? That's why we need a scalable AI solution, right? Okay. So we needed something that can adapt to increasing demand. But if the demand is decreasing for whatever, then you have to adapt to that, right? So you're not over provisioning resources. And also, if something comes in all of a sudden, your system will still respond within the allowable latency. So you have to, the infrastructure has to expand its capacity automatically in a highly scalable way, right? So low latency experience, so that individual customers get a personalized experience out of that. So they've chosen AWS to do that. And remember all the architectural components that I listed earlier? Well, I did something similar for this one. So the architecture that they used for Netflix was compute resources. So they've chosen to use the GPU-based EC2. For data storage, they use S3. For metadata, historical data, as well as using DynamoDB, super fast NoSQL solution for storing some real-time data. Okay. And with the data pipeline, they use Glue, and they also use something called the AWS data pipeline to orchestrate, that is, to coordinate data coming in, cleansing, transforming, and pushing to the next process, right? And real-time data streams are managed through Amazon Kinesis. So Kinesis, once again, is a more generic service that handles streaming data. So they use that as a data pipeline. And the model training, they use SageMaker, right? Model deployment, they also use SageMaker endpoint. So when you see a SageMaker endpoint, that's how one exposes your inference, that is your model that you've created, to the world. Okay, so they used SageMaker to do that. Networking, they use VPC, virtual private cloud, with the global accelerator for low latency. Remember, I've already explained what the global accelerator was, right? So the users come into the AWS network at the earliest opportunity to take advantage of the internal AWS network. Security, IAM, okay, identity access management, and then they use the CloudWatch for monitoring, as well as CloudTrail and X-Ray. There you go. Okay, so I think this is not a complex example. It's a pretty normal example, I suppose, but with massive scale that's needed. And it does have all the components that we talked about in this presentation. So I hope you enjoyed that. It was very quick, but I enjoyed giving it to you. So, but if I missed something, please do ask me questions. So I'm ready for your questions now.
Thank you, Terumi. That was very informative. I know everyone is looking forward to the Q&A session, so go ahead and start putting your questions into the questions panel. And now I'd like to give the presentation rights over to Remy, our vendor manager, to introduce our promotions and webinar-related courses.
Thank you so much. And once again, a very warm welcome to everyone who has joined our today's session. Now, I would like to take you all through some of our handpicked resources, which we think will immensely help in accelerating your learning journey on AWS. Starting off with a quick overview of Netcom learning and what sets us apart from the other cloud training leaders. We have very recently been recognized by trainingindustry.com as one of the top 20 IT training companies in the US. Another major driver of our expertise is our 25 plus years of industry presence. We have been able to service over these last 25 years to over 80% of the Fortune 500 companies in both the B2B as well as the B2G space. Now, we just wanted to mention that this session is being recorded. So in case you want to refer back to any of the topics that will be covered during the today's session, we will be sharing the recording with you later on, so you can access the recording through that link. Moving to the recommended courses, which we think will best suit your learning journey. What you see right now are some of our upcoming training batches on the top courses, which you can register for. The dates have been mentioned, but in case you have any queries regarding the same, you can at any time reach out to our team. We also have a mix of the most relevant resources, which will help you get a better understanding on some of the other AWS courses. Moving on to the AWS skilling program. So this helps you to develop role-based cloud skills, working side by side our champion level AWS authorized instructors who train cloud professionals on the latest AWS technologies and tools. So now as a part of the program, you and your organization both may also be eligible for free AWS certification exam vouchers and extended lab facilities that extend up to 5 weeks after the completion of the training. Now, we are excited to also bring to you the AWS Skill Builder, which is a new learning center with 600 plus free digital courses that is built by the AWS experts. This includes the game-based learning opportunities with CloudQuest and team-based competition with Gen. Its unique set of offerings actually include practical real-world and hands-on lab experiences in a live AWS environment. Now, this is something that we personally love because it showcases the effort that the AWS team takes to make the learning as fun and immersive for the learners. Moving on, another big announcement that we have for our learners today, and something that I had given a hint in the previous, in one of the previous slides, is about our ongoing discount fest, which, as a part of which, you can now choose the AWS training which suits your job role, and you can enroll yourself at almost half of the original price. Please note that this offer is applicable only on the course trainings and not on the course certifications, and the last date to enroll for this is September 30th. Moving on, our free AWS e-learning resources follow a self-paced training model wherein you get the liberty of accessing extensive course-related videos that are delivered by the AWS subject matter experts on the go. So these videos cover the availability on the device of your choice. So you can access them from your laptop, from your tablet, from your phones as well. So please feel free to access these free resources and make the most out of them. Additionally, please feel free to register for a demo to get an idea on what our 2-hour private group trainings on AWS entails. Now, these trainings will be delivered by our AWS authorized instructors with an agenda of understanding the different AWS services and solutions, and will be beneficial for you to devise a roadmap as per your team's current learning needs. The Amazon Web Services Learning Needs Analysis, which we also call as AWS LNA. Now, this is a free self-assessment tool that helps you identify your organization's cloud skills gap. That includes the participating employees to complete an adaptive e-survey that takes no more than 15 minutes, depending on the role. The idea here is to come up with a targeted, cost-effective training and certification plan that's right for your organization and addresses the specific needs of your employees. Moving on, we have the Learning Passport next, which is a flexible team training package specifically designed and customized for the number of learners you have. The Learning Passport is redeemable across our entire portfolio, which covers more than 4,000 official courses valid over 12 months. Now we have an exciting solution for you, which is Netcom Plus Learning subscription that is there for our enterprise customers.
So all you need to do here is to pay one time and you get unlimited access to authorized training from top vendors that includes AWS for a span of 12 months, which is 1 year. Currently, we have three packages available. You can get started for free with a silver pack, the one that you see on the first block, which allows you access to more than 300 learning modules. You can upgrade to the gold pack for just $199 and access 400 plus learning modules in addition to the silver pack benefits. And lastly, we highly recommend our most popular offering of all and ideal for our enterprise customers, which is the platinum package that can be unlocked if you have more than 10 learners. Now, in terms of the benefits, it gives you access to 400 plus learning modules and 100 plus virtual instructor led courses across top vendors. So it's a great offering that Netcom team has curated just for our learners. So if you require the details, we will be sharing all the details with you, the links with you. Please take some time to go through them. And if you are interested, we have our team uh, that can answer any of your queries that you might have around the learner subscription. Now, in addition to our custom programs, do feel free to also go through some of our additional resources, which are curated, keeping the learners' needs in demand, and let us know learners' needs in mind, and let us know in the comments if you have any recommendations for us with respect to coming up with more such assets. Now, apart from our virtual sessions, you can also catch the relevant updates related to IT and business training through our social media handles. So please feel free to follow us on all for all the latest updates. Now, lastly, the CEO of Netcom Learning is an avid writer, and you can check out a glimpse of his book, which is a practical, actionable guide on how to boost performance, successfully manage change, and innovate more quickly. Thank you.
Thanks so much for guiding us through that information, Remy. And now we're going to go ahead and jump right into our question and answer session. If you haven't yet, it's not too late to pop your questions into the question panel. And as we start our Q&A sessions, we're also going to launch a quick poll that we want to invite you to participate in. Doing so helps us to know how we can better serve you by telling us who might be interested in more information or in taking some additional training. In addition, we have a lot more informative webinars coming up, so please go to netcomlearning.com/webinars in order to register. First question is, can you elaborate on how AWS services like SageMaker and EC2 instances can be cost optimized, especially for startups or smaller organizations that are looking to scale their AI solutions?
Wow, great. Thank you so much for asking that question. And it's a great question because that's exactly what cloud services are supposed to be, right? So you only pay for what you use, and that's the basis for cost optimization, right? Obviously, there are other types of things that you can do to optimize costs. So, so for instance, for SageMaker, you only pay for what you use, right? Just like anything else, right? So it allows for instances that supports the SageMaker to be tailored to whatever the workload that you're looking for, right? So you can shut them down if you don't need to when they're not in use, especially if you're using something like batch. Yeah, you can shut them down until when you need it. If it's once a week, just bring them up once a week and then use them. So, but at the basis, though, AWS SageMaker is using EC2 on a lot of these things. And if you already know that you're going to be using, let's say, a number of EC2s always, then let's say, I always need like, a minimum of 3 EC2s daily. If that's the case, then it probably pays for you to buy the volume discount, right? Remember the reserve instances, or there's something called spot instances where you could take advantage of like deep discounts that AWS gives you on the EC2. So if you already know if you need if you already know how many servers you need, you can always use reserve instances and spot instances as well. Okay, so and to check and see if the decisions that you made about that, options is working for you, go to the Cost Explorer and check them out, and they'll tell you the trends and if you are actually, getting the savings or not. I hope that answers your question.
Second question coming in is, how does AWS handle data governance and compliance, especially when dealing with sensitive or regulated data in scalable AI solutions?
Yeah, so that was part of the architectural consideration that we talked about, right, about security, right? So AWS in general has a very, very strong emphasis on security and compliance itself, okay? So there are very specialized services such as, for example, AWS Key Management Service, they call it KMS, allows you to create and manage, cryptographic keys so that you can manage them yourself, so that you can be responsible for the strength and how often and what type of encryption you use or integrate into the AWS services, right? So it also supports multiple compliance certifications. So I think I've already mentioned it, but AWS itself is highly compliant with many countries' security requirements. So check all that out in AWS and see, depending upon which country you're in and what type of governance requirements and compliance requirements you have, that make sure that AWS is also compliant with that. Not only you are being compliant, but the AWS itself is also compliant with that as well. Okay, and they have other services, which is like fantastic. It's not just ML services. Take, for example, there's a service called Amazon Macie. And Amazon Macie is, from my experience, it's like a DLP, data loss prevention. So data loss prevention alerts you if you have exposed some sensitive data that you shouldn't really expose to the world, right? And because in machine learning, we use S3 a lot, right? S3 as a object storage. Macie works on S3, and if you have data that is sensitive, it'll try to catch that and alert you. And also, if you're sharing data that if AWS thinks that maybe you need to be reminded that you have this data available to these individuals or this to the public, they'll let you know about it. So yeah, so AWS actually does have all these security and compliance services that you can leverage for your machine learning solutions.
Let's take one last question for this session today. Could you provide more details on how real-time analytics and data streaming using services like Amazon Kinesis integrate into a scalable AI architecture? And what are some common use cases that you've seen?
Yeah, right. So this was also in the architectural consideration. So Kinesis, I mentioned in that, was more of a generic service that handles streaming data. So Kinesis is designed really for real-time data streaming, right? So if you have data coming in, for ingesting, that is to taking into the model, Kinesis is perfect for that. So Kinesis can ingest your data, it can actually process data, and it can actually analyze your data in real time. So it's a highly, highly functional service. And also, you only pay for what you use. So it has dynamic pricing and other things. So, and because it is a more of a generic component, it is built to integrate with other services. So for instance, data ingestion through Kinesis can be processed using Lambda function, remember the Lambda, and then fed into SageMaker for real-time predictions, right? And the scalability and integration capability makes it a really powerful tool for real-time AI applications. Okay, so there you go. I hope that answers that question.
Once again, I want to remind you that as you leave this session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to help us by taking a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience as we are constantly looking at how we can improve our future sessions. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. We want to thank all of you for joining us today, and if you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. We hope that you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Have a great day, everyone.